Okay, now we're kind of working our way from top to bottom, I guess, in the body here, from superior to inferior. So, the next thing we're going to talk about are ovaries. Okay, obviously these are the female, organs that produce female hormones, as well as eggs that could be fertilized and make a brand new human being, right? So we're going to talk about it in the endocrine aspect at this point. We'll talk about them again when we talk about the reproductive system. So ovaries produce two, actually a bunch of hormones, but we're going to limit it to two right now. We'll talk about the other ones. We get into pregnancy and how eggs are produced. We're going to talk about estrogen and progesterone. So we're going to talk about them as hormones and not autocrines or paracrines. So estrogen regulates monthly menstrual cycles, and progesterone supports pregnancy and menstruation. And I know it sounds like, maybe they kind of go on top of each other as far as function goes, but I think this next chart should really kind of explain it. I gotta say, I think for women in the class, or especially women that are just learning, about birth control, or people that are becoming sexually active, and they need to know this really. You should know how your body works because it really is important to to have an appreciation of, right? So. What you're seeing here is a chart that has five different, sort of dependent variables, I guess we could say, on it, five different y-axes. The x-axis is time, right? So I'm going to show really quick. Really what I'm going to spend most time on is the ovarian hormones that you can see right here, okay? And then I'm also going to regulate it to relate it to here too next. So this is a British, or I guess maybe this is a European anyway chart. They're calling estrogen estradiol. Okay, so I just want you to understand that these are the same exact hormones. It's not like some different thing or whatever. Now, if you look at this, this is at 0 days. Okay, so this is basically when the menstrual period starts. Okay, so in other words, the endometrium, the lining of the uterus, starts to break down. That releases blood and tissue, and that's the beginning of menstruation. Okay, so at that point, estrogen and progesterone, the purple line, are as low as they're going to get, really. Okay, now menstruation is going to end roughly, oh, I don't know, 4 or 5 days, depending on, an individual woman's cycle. Uh, and menstruation will stop. So at that point, you can see that estradiol or estrogen starts to increase past this threshold. What that eventually is going to do is to get a follicle. This is going to become the egg mature, right? The estrogen or estradiol creeps up for the next about 2 weeks or so, almost 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden it drops. That drop indicates that ovulation should take place. So as soon as that estradiol stops being produced by the ovaries, ovulation occurs, right? So in other words, the egg is released from the ovary. Within the first 24 to 36 hours, that's when the egg is most prone to becoming fertilized. So it's right at this point, right? Right at that midway through the menstrual cycle that ovulation happens, and therefore you're most apt to get pregnant. Okay, so this also goes with a couple other hormones. I'm going to leave that on the table for now, but also luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone, as you can see, they also pretty much peak right at that point. Okay, now when estrogen drops, you can see that progesterone, the purple line, starts to creep up. Right, progesterone is actually produced by this structure called the corpus luteum, and that causes the uterine lining to thicken up and to hold more blood vessels and to thicken up and keep going, keep going, keep going. When progesterone eventually, at about 28 days or so, when it drops, that's what leads to the breakdown of the uterine lining, the endometrium, and menstruation starts again. So I want to make sure that everybody's clear. This 0 day, hopefully you can see my cursor. I'm just going to draw it again. This 0 day mark is actually the same as the 28-day mark. I know this chart can be a little bit confusing, but you see how menstruation is here and here? Okay, so really this is the end of the cycle. They're just showing the beginning of the next cycle in this little, right hand chunk of the chart. Okay, so I think that that's important to understand. Now, what practical or I don't want to say application because it sounds so cold and clinical, but why is this important? I guess because, well, this shows you that when the best or maybe the worst time to have sex is, depending on if you want to have a baby or not. And it also explain once we get there into the reproductive system how birth control pills work, right? If you keep estrogen high all the time, you'll never ovulate, right? If you keep progesterone high all the time, that uterine lining will never break down, and therefore it's going to be really actually hard to get fertilization to happen for a multitude of other reasons. Okay, so a couple different versions of female birth control, right? And we'll talk a lot more about this. I kind of don't want to get bogged down in the first unit. I think we have enough on our plate at this point with just reopening and everything. What I'm going to ask you about are these two hormones on the quiz. I am not going to ask you about these two. So I don't know what, not ask you those. And these two I will. Okay, so estrogen and progesterone are important to know. The last hormones that we're going to talk about, we'll switch gears a little bit and we'll talk about the testes, right? So in males, testes, which again were ovaries at one point, produce testosterone leading to puberty. Obviously, secondary sex characteristics, more muscular body, you grow hair, bone density increases, and all that stuff, sperm production. They can also lead to aggression and muscle growth. So if I were to ask you on a quiz, we talked about this a lot in class. The testes here themselves, not the epididymis, that's just for storing sperm, but the testes here themselves, those are the hormones the glands that produce testosterone. There's a blood vessel that you don't see in this picture that are going to come down and take those hormones to their targets. Well, if I was to ask you on the quiz what the targets were, obviously you can see everything right here, right? What leads to, what high amounts of testosterone leads to. Okay, so I know I'm really just kind of like skimming the surface of some really important sex hormones here. But again, we have a whole unit on the reproductive system later in the semester, and I'd rather, kind of start a little bit light with this first unit and give you the basics. And there you go. Now, accompanying this PowerPoint, you should also have a list of hormones with normal ranges. Okay, so that's listed on Canvas. And you can go to that and actually use that as a reference to know, number one, what the ranges are, and that's going to help you do the lab eventually. Number two, you should go to that as a list of hormones that you should know for the exam. Okay, so a lot of this is in your book. Okay, a lot of this is obviously in the PowerPoints that I made for you and the videos. If you have a question, what am I going to tell you? Of course, what I'm going to tell you is hit me up on Remind, email, something like that, so that I know you have, you're confused about something, and I will be 100% happy to address that with you and make sure you understand. Okay, we're all in this together, guys. All right, so it was really great to see you for class. The last announcement I wanted to say was after the second session on Thursday's class, I noticed, and maybe you did too, it was pretty much a ghost town on the second floor of the science building. So I'm going to ask around and see what we should really be doing about classes where we're just doing lecture. If it's something where you can stay home to do that, that's what I'm going to try to pursue, simply because it's good for public health and it's also more convenient for us. Okay, if these videos are working for you, if they're not working for you, and you need to talk about it, we can always schedule a Zoom meeting or something, right? So I'll let you know about that by the time we have class next Tuesday, and hopefully things will be a little bit more cleared up because it seems like it was pretty. Well, it seems like a lot of people got different messages. We'll just say it that way. For about holding class, when and how often, and that kind of thing. So I'll let you know. I was only doing what I was told originally. So have a great weekend. Hopefully these videos are helpful. If they're not, please let me know about it. Don't be that person that's just sitting there like, oh man, this is awful, I don't understand, because you're not really doing yourself any favors, nor are you doing me any favors, right? I'm here to help you. Please let me know if you need help. Have a great weekend. Get outside, do something fun, and I'll talk to you later.